Arbiters, Watchers, Karen, the boat guy, not the let me see your manager type. Rugby, get the masks.
These are not the right masks, Rugby. What are these even for? Let's talk about Psychopomps.
We could have done this whole video about the Duskwalkers, which is a heritage feat for Pathfinder 2nd Edition, which is a mortal soul that has been chosen by a Psychopomp to do their bidding. But honestly, I feel like that works better for a Paladin or a Warlock class instead of a heritage or racial type. They have some really interesting heritage feats, but a lot of them are based around your death and then coming back afterwards. So that would be better for more like an undead race or just the Duskwalkers in general. Think Vax from Vox Machina. As for Western pop culture, you really only get the Grim Reaper or the Angel of Death, or maybe the Ferryman for the River Styx. There's an argument to be made about the Headless Horseman, but that's a whole nother can of worms. At the least, we see them as some kind of uncaring, soulless killing machine that should be feared and avoided, when in reality, they are the quintessential spiritual guardians for everyone on the material plane. I really love Death's depiction in the Neil Gaiman Sandman comics, so moving forward, we need to keep that in mind. So while most Psychopomps are named creatures, individual one-offs, there are so many denizens of the Boneyard and followers of Pharasma, you can be really creative in how you design your Psychopomp. The main thing that really drew my attention to the Psychopomps are the masks. I love them. I love to nerd out about masks. I'm honestly surprised it took me this long to make the video for it. The masks are meant to separate the Psychopomps from their past lives while still honoring their existence and their culture. It's kind of like a superhero wearing a mask, or I don't know, like a gothic name tag. I just love that your duty and dedication to the flow of the universe and the protection of souls is way more important than any one individual or who you may or may not have been. Psychopomps are actually more related to angels and demons than they are to mortals. And since both of them exist as playable races, I don't see why you can't play a Psychopomp. They are the stewards of the souls as they pass from one plane to another and through the Boneyard into the greater cosmos of soulness. And as such, they weren't meant to be benevolent or destructive. They are here to maintain the flow and balance of souls through the universe. And with that, step 1. Choose your type of Psychopomp, because there are a couple different varieties. The Vanth, which are guardians, who just generally watch over the souls as they pass through the universe. These are your classical Reapers. They're more about watching and monitoring the flow of souls through this universe than actually guiding anyone specifically. Mammoths are going to be more classically aligned as Valkyries, actually guiding people from point A to point B. Then we have the Algae or the Algea, however you want to say it. I don't know, they're birds. It's kind of like Harry Potter, but for after you die. Specifically if you've been coerced into doing weird undead things with like a necromancer. You know, I didn't think that was that common, but apparently it happens enough that there's a whole department to deal with it. You know, I guess it's kind of also the plot of Harry Potter, so it's exactly like that. And then we have the Olethros, but they really only deal with you if you try to mess with fate. These are by far the creepiest in my opinion. Don't mess with these guys. Then we got our Hunter type Pokemon like Isopok and Shoki, and just like the name implies, these guys go after souls that are either running amok or just refuse to return to the River of Souls. This is a great option for people that want to play a Paladin or a Ranger as a Psychopomp. And then you have the judges that basically look at every single thing you did through your entire life and then decide where you get to go and end up. I'm just saying, I feel like these guys might have a little more power than everyone else in the Boneyard. I suppose you probably have to go to law school at least like one of your past lives to get that job.
Do you think that's an appointed position, or do you have to like pass some kind of Boneyard bar exam?
The scholars are definitely some of the weirder ones. They're like four-winged birds with really cool masks, and their whole purpose is to recall memories and record time. Basically undead smartphones, like most familiars. And finally we have the Ushers, which are basically demigods, and while they are some of the more powerful creatures in the Boneyard, I think this is a great place to start for a player character. They're more of like a free-range Psychopomp, not really following one unique cause or style. They're just general travelers or denizens of the Boneyard. Because time is an illusion, you can basically start here and say that you've just been a Psychopomp as far as you can remember, or you could have just died and are now trying to find your feet in your new role as a Psychopomp in the Boneyard. Let's talk about stats. While there is an argument to be made that you should be choosing your stats based on which type of Psychopomp you chose, it's not a hard sell to say you get strength and wisdom because you are at the core a spiritual guardian. You're basically starting the game with whatever the neutral version of a divine fervor or strength is, to protect the souls of the living and or guide the souls of the dead. And with that, the wisdom to know how to use it effectively. Wait, did I just accidentally make Shazam? Oh crap, not again. Rugby, go get the lightning rod! Being a monitor of the Boneyard, or at least a scion of one of these creatures, you should get some pretty cool traits. This includes darkvision and life sense, which allows you to sense both living and dead within 10 feet. Some editions let this go all the way up to 60 feet, as well treated like a blind sense or a true sight. I think that's totally fine as long as it only affects the living and the dead. Something akin to the Paladin's divine sense. You gain spirit touch, which is just like ghost touch, but it works for any of your attacks. You could go as far as giving them a +1 to damage and to hit, but only when attacking living or dead creatures. And trust me, that's a little more specific than you might think. In the same vein, for languages, you would normally start with celestial and abyssal or infernal, but if you even have the spell Tongues as an at-will spell, because if you're tied to the fabric of mortal existence, I really don't think language should be a barrier for you. If you don't want to do the at-will spell, you should at least have proficiency in language, or have some form of minimal communications. Hell, maybe that's why Death never says anything and he just points. He has no idea what you're saying, but he's done this so many times, he just going through the motions now. And finally, every Psychopomp should have the means of tracking down and transporting their charges from wherever they are to where they need to go. Whether this is something like a scry spell or a hunter's mark, you could even put a stipulation on it that can only be the one person they're in charge of at any given time. And along with that, they need something like greater teleportation or plane shift to get them where they are going. Psychopomps should be very comfortable not only moving between planes, but transporting people between planes. And moving a small group or large group of people just seems right up their alley. Just don't lose anybody in one of the greater hells. Or do. I don't know you. Morally ambiguous is kind of the best way to describe Psychopomps, in my opinion. You're just here to protect the sacred timeline, and I don't know, who cares. Back to Pathfinder 2nd Edition, there are quite a few feats for the Soul Warden archetype, which give you Psychopomp abilities without actually being a Psychopomp. So this should be a pretty good example of things that you should be able to do on a normal basis. Things like concentrate, things like consecration or turn undead, preventing people from being charmed or possessed. There's a whole bunch of really cool little defensive things in there. And if you want to go the Duskwalker route, you get these at varying different levels. So if your DM isn't down with you being an unliving demigod, there's definitely a way to do this raw. I personally like the idea that your physical body is a little tougher and a little more resilient than a normal mortals would be, because you're supposed to be their steward, and your physical body isn't actually physical. You're technically just a spirit, only soul. Let's dig into that a little bit. Psychopomps are more closely related to angels, demons, and elementals than they are to mortals on the material plane. Every Psychopomp should be immune to death effects. End of line. You can't be killed, at least not in the traditional sense. You can be destroyed, but you kind of just stop existing. Your energy just dissipates into the whateverness of wherever you are. Unlike mortals, who when they die turn into tiny little delicious soul snacks for other demons and extraplanar creatures, which is why the Psychopomps have to find them, pick them up, take them to the River of Souls, judge them, and throw them back into the ether so that human beings can become whatever it is they are. Cosmic balance is pretty great. But because of this, you are immune to poisons and diseases, because once again, you have no real body to infect. You're resistant to cold and electricity because of some kind of spirit battery, which the cold just doesn't really affect you, unless you're some kind of Tesla charging station, in which case you just don't work. But that being said, there is some lore to only being able to actually die in your own plane. So if you're in the boneyard, or you're a Psychopomp of Pharasma, because you are just kind of a tool for her grand plan. I don't need to go around telling people how much of tools they are. Yeah, probably already know. So get out there, buy a boat, ferry some lost spirits to, wherever they're going and stuff when they die. And if not, just fake it till you make it. Thanks for watching, everybody. Remember to keep your dice on the table.
Rugby, why do we even have these masks? What do you mean it's for a big job you have coming up? Who else are you working for? You know what? Don't tell me. Don't tell me. I don't want to know. Why does this mask smell like wet dog? Because it was worn by a wet dog before you gave it to me. Yeah, okay. I don't know what I was expecting.